They say the secret to a happy marriage is to never go to bed on an argument, but maybe it's to actually go to bed with someone else.
That's the theory of Deepa Paul, our guest today, who has a husband and a boyfriend. Good morning, Deepa. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Kat. Good morning, Ben. Lovely to be here.
Great to have you on the sofa. Obviously, as soon as we understand a little bit about you and the book that you've written, there's so many questions that people start asking. We're in conventional relationships, both Kat and I. You have a very different sort of approach. Can you just explain a little bit what your status is in your relationship?
So I've been married for 17 years. I've been a mother for 12 years, and I also have a boyfriend 5 years. And currently, I'm not dating anyone else because, as you can imagine, that's a pretty full plate.
I don't know how you do it all. In all honesty, I've got no idea how you juggle everything.
Well, I could say the same for you. You're walking over here while reading and, being such a bubbly, smiley person. So I think it's just, something that fulfills me is to explore new connections with other people and just see what that reveals about myself. We see ourselves in the mirror of relationships, and I think that's absolutely fascinating work. And part of, what I wrote about in the book is how my husband came along with me for that adventure. And a lot of people do ask me how it works. And that's exactly what the book is called.
Well, yeah, because I think you wrote the book because so many people were asking you questions about it. So here is my husband, here is my boyfriend, here I am.
Here I am. So the questions I received were mostly in the beginning from men on dating apps.
Right.
Ask me how it works. It was on my Tinder profile. I said to people, I'm here with my husband, go on, ask me how it works. And 9 times out of 10, people would say, well, I have all these questions. And it began just as an attempt to answer, people's curiosity. But it just grew. It started out as an essay, and it just grew and grew and grew. And, almost 400 pages later, we have a whole book.
So you've got a sort of exploratory book on how it works. But if we go back to when it started, Deepa, because you're in your marriage with your husband, but then you started feeling like you wanted to explore elsewhere as well. So you started sort of having affairs outside of the relationship, am I right?
Yeah, let's step back a little bit. I come from the Philippines. It's a very conservative culture. Fun fact, one of the last 2 countries in the world where divorce is illegal.
So you cannot get... Is that because of religion?
Yes, absolutely. The other nation, by the way, is Vatican City, population 865.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people getting married there.
Quite a lot of priests there as well.
Yeah, so it was really conservative, and I just always felt I was at odds with the way people saw relationships and pleasure and desire. And then I moved to Amsterdam, which was the real hinge point because it's a very liberal city. And I saw all the different ways people could experience relationships, but also pleasure. And I wanted to try it all. So in the beginning, I explored on my own, but that wasn't really working.
Can I ask a question about that, Dee? Because you're in a relationship, in a marriage with somebody that you're in love with, you have a family. I'm not sure if you had a family then, but how did you deal... Did you cope with guilt in that scenario when you know that you're sort of, traditionally within the relationship, you aren't supposed to go and have extramarital affairs, and you were? How did you manage that part of it?
Well, I remember feeling kind of guilty and ashamed about how I was and all of these things that I was curious about. I wondered, am I too much? But then part of what I learned is I can ask for what I believe I deserve. You don't have to hide it. You can be upfront and honest with the person you love and trust that they'll accept you. And in the beginning, it wasn't smooth sailing because, stepping out of the bounds of a traditional relationship, it's a process.
Yeah.
But
how did he react?
I was going to say, how did you broach the subject? Like, what did you say? And were you honest about the previous affairs that have been illicit? Or how did you do it?
Well, the affairs kind of came out on their own. It was one affair, and I'd explored online with answering ads on a personal site just to find out about, all these things I was curious about. And when all of that came out into the open, it was a real hinge point, a turning point. So there was a lot of trust that had to be rebuilt. And we really sat down and had to have this kind of come to Jesus conversation about what do I want out of a marriage? What do you want out of a marriage? We'd already been married 10 years at the time. So there was a lot of trust, but also, just this moment kind of, destroyed all that, and it had to be rebuilt. It's not something I would recommend for people who want to dive into open relationships. I wrote about my messes in the book, so you don't have to make them. But, over time and just being consistent with each other and being honest with each other, we came to a place that's really beautiful for both of us.
And what was your husband's initial reaction?
Well, when I first brought up the idea of all the things I wanted to try that I was reading about, he was vehemently against it. He said, decent people don't do these things. Married people don't do these things. But I've always seen marriage as an adventure, as a team undertaking. And I said, I want to go on these adventures with you.
Yeah.
Is there some way we can do that together?
Right.
And polyamory wasn't on the cards when we started out, but now it's an option that for most people exists. A lot of people are exploring it now because of the flexibility and freedom that it gives them.
Deepa, what's the exact definition of polyamory?
So for me...
Yeah. Does it change depending on who you are or how you frame it?
I think so.
Right.
Well, I can't really quote you from a book other than my own, but for me, polyamory means the ability and the capacity to be in multiple intimate and romantic relationships with more than one person.
So you are now in a relationship with your husband and also your boyfriend.
Yes, I am.
Robert, and that's 5 years you've been together?
Yeah, 5 years and counting.
And so initially, I think your relationships were very brief hookups, but you then fell for Robert and actually must have a real connection with him because you've been with him for 5 years. How do he and your husband get along?
Oh, there's a term I want to tell you about, which is called garden party polyamory.
So
it's like both of them encounter each other at social situations. It's like the garden party you go to once a year, maybe like the VE celebration.
Right. Yeah.
And they're quite social with each other. They're very, a lot of respect for each other, but they're not required to be best mates. So there's a healthy respect.
Is there any jealousy?
I think there's envy. So envy is kind of wishing maybe sometimes that one has what the other has. So I have a wonderful domestic life and I'm fully available to my family. And maybe my boyfriend envies that sometimes, but my husband envies the adventure and spontaneity that I have with my boyfriend.
Because you do talk about that and say that perhaps at some point you are going to have to readdress the relationship with your boyfriend because your boyfriend's long-term goals are to have a family and have children, and that's something you couldn't do.
Yes, I was very clear about, what I could offer him at the beginning.
Yeah.
I think setting expectations at the beginning of every relationship should be something everyone does.
Yeah.
So for our relationship, I entered into it knowing that it would probably have to end someday if he finds someone that he wants to have a family with. And that's okay, because we can have something beautiful and special, and it doesn't have to last forever.
So is he having relationships with other people while he's your girlfriend?
Well,
boyfriend.
Boyfriend, sorry, yeah. Is he having... Yes,
it's complicated. It is complicated.
Does Robert have other partners?
No, he doesn't.
So he's monogamous with you?
Yes.
So you're the only one that's having the cake and eating it, and having two...
I'm kind of the hinge between these two relationships. Yeah, that's right.
How would you feel if he does go and find somebody? Would that be difficult for you? Because it feels like if you've been together 5 years, there must be a lot of emotion and connection there.
Absolutely. I think I would feel, sad about it, and maybe sad about losing something special. But I've always known what he's wanted. And I just want the people I'm with to feel loved and happy and free, the same way I am.
So you want people to feel loved and happy and free. But your daughter is 12. So she must have some idea of certain things, but obviously not others. How do you handle that, and what conversations do you have with her?
Well, she's always known, for example, that I sleep over at Robert's house once a week. And she had a working knowledge of sleepovers from the time she was about 6 or 7. Yeah. So she understands a sleepover is something fun that we do. And when I left for Robert's, she would say, well, have fun. And I would say, well, I will.
Yeah.
And the next morning when I came home, she'd be like, did you have a great time? And I would say, yes, I did. But like any other parent, the details of my intimate life are not for children.
Yes.
So she has an understanding of what's going on. The most important thing is that she sees me and my husband love each other. Like, she sees that every day, and that provides a solid, secure foundation for her. And we sat down with her, when the book was sold, and I knew things were going to become public.
Yes, of course.
I wanted to stick the label on it and tell her, from me, this is what's going on. And her answer, I'm not going to give it away because it's chapter 14 in the book. What do you tell your daughter? But her response surprised me. And children are so wise and understanding when they have that secure foundation. And we've done our best to create that for them.
And how about your family back in the Philippines? Because, of course, as you said, it's a very, very strict country when it comes to relationships. How have they reacted? I'm
really lucky to have a wonderfully supportive family. My sister's in the studio. She flew in from Manila to be here. And my mother, I lost my father when I was really young. So my mother's always been really present for me, very compassionate, and I've always felt unconditionally loved. I think she didn't really know what to call it, but she kind of figured out that something was going on. And so when I told her a couple of years ago that I was in an open marriage, she said, do what makes you happy, and everyone in your life should be in your life for you to be more of yourself. And you will know when it's time to let go. You will know you know what's best for you. You're an adult. And I just felt, so accepted and loved, and I'm really lucky in that.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised.
absolutely.
I'm not surprised. It's a fascinating subject.
It really
thank you
is.
for sharing.
And thank you for being so honest
Absolutely.
too. Yeah.
Deirdre's here. She's been listening in. Deirdre, it's amazing listening to Deepa speaking so openly and honestly and sharing it with her family. I wonder what you make of their scenario and how it works for their marriage.
Well, I'm really glad it works for Deepa, people tell me that the book is just the most amazing read. But I'd be really worried about other people thinking that this is the way to go if what you need to do is sort out tensions and problems within your own relationship. It's funny, when I heard about Deepa's story, I must say I did think, is this part of her that just worries about trusting all her feelings to one man? And it's only now that I've just learned that actually she lost her father when she was very young. That may not just be a coincidence. So what I'd say to anybody who's thinking of going down this road is do at least first consider having counselling for your relationship, exploring the other options, sharing your feelings with one another, because it's not an instant solution. And I'd worry about the effect on children. Her daughter is just 12, so she's not into the teenage years yet. These are very difficult things to explore. So, I'm really happy if this is working out for Deepa, but it's not what I'd say is a way to go for everyone.
And I imagine you'd agree with that as well, to be fair.
Absolutely, I agree. It's not for everyone, but it's all about finding what works for you, what fulfills you, and never thinking you're too much, because someone will love you for just how you are.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. Thank you for visiting our This Morning YouTube channel. We upload tons of new content every single day. So hit the subscribe button, like all the videos, and don't miss out. We'll see you in the morning.